Pearse Doherty, Perenomid.
Jaskin Corlia. Tánaise Jultius la Yavildig Sirena, den Statshaw, Gulera Kufi Mui Homus Trom a good Judgelacti, Ohio and Juntus Avi Judgel, Difa Marialer Mui Homus Avi Arhu. Jultiu shot the Marharu the strategy Avi Fuer, strategy Kalna, strategy Gan Cree, a Orburu, a Creeler and Realtus in the Vito Hain Marfuarta. Realtas in a Vito Hain Marwal Shinshra. Tánaise up to 12,000 citizens of this state, many of them with profound disabilities, were denied their entitlement to a modest allowance paid to them in recognition of their disability. They were denied this as a result of a cold, callous and heartless strategy developed at the heart of government. A cabinet that you were a senior member of as Minister for Foreign Affairs at the time. The decision that your government took at the time are laid bare for all of us now to see in relation to secret documents that have been reported on. Tánaise, you were party to this strategy. You were party to agreeing this strategy as a senior member of government and of cabinet at the time. We now know that in July 2009, you and your government colleagues were presented with a memo from your Minister for Health and Minister for Social Protection. It made it clear that the state was unlikely to defend cases by or on behalf of those who had their disability payments illegally withdrawn from them. The memo that you were presented with went on to state that a comprehensive trawl could be done of HSE records over the 30 years to determine the level of exposure to the state. But the Minister advised you and your colleagues against doing this, as it would be unlikely to escape media attention or speculation and could generate further claims which otherwise would not have been made. The strategy of your government was to conceal the fact that there was no legal basis to denying these payments to persons with disabilities, and to do nothing that would give rise to awareness to these individuals of their legal entitlements to a modest allowance in recognition of their disabilities. Tánaiste, the strategy was a deliberate one. It was a calculated one. It was a one that was developed at Cabinet, in which you were a member of, to conceal from some of the most vulnerable citizens, those with disability in the care of the state, their legal entitlements. The following year, in 2010, again while you were a member of the Cabinet, you were agreed, along with your Cabinet colleagues, to continue. You were asked to agree to continue with this strategy, when at that time you already knew that these denial of payments were unlawful. And again, you acceded to this. You were party to this decision. Your government agreed to this. Tánaiste, you knew what the right thing was to do was. How do we know this? Because we can see it in the memo. It's contained there. It was to establish a repayment scheme to right this wrong that was done. But you and your government decided against this, and not only that, you decided to do everything possible to ensure that those entitled to these payments would never find out about their entitlements. So can I ask you, because this is really, really hurtful for so many families out there to find that government after government knew that these payments were being held unlawfully, that a deliberate and cold-hearted strategy was developed at the heart of government. So can I ask you to explain to this House, but most importantly to those families, why you were part of this? How do you justify knowing the legal advice that you got in the memo in 2009 that these cases couldn't be defended, and yet you continued to deny these payments to the individuals and decided to do nothing that would raise awareness either in the media or the wider public that would alert people to their legal entitlements? Please explain that to all of us.
Well, in the first instance, Deputy, both in terms of the nursing homes issue and in terms of the disability allowance, those were of a historic nature in terms of how they evolved. The fundamental problem was, Deputy, that the public policy was transparent from the outset in respect of both disability allowance and in respect of nursing home payments. Going right back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, 1990s. Public policy was very transparent in respect of nursing homes, that people were paid a contribution and so forth. And that was by virtue of regulations that had been put into place. Many decades later, it transpired that those regulations were not consistent with the Primary Act. That was the fundamental flaw. And at that time, the government of the day took a decision to retrospectively pay back on the repayment scheme in respect of those availing of public nursing homes, payments that had been taken from them. In relation to disability and the DPMA, a similar situation pertained in respect of, again, the public policy being very transparent, that allowance was introduced in the first instance to provide for people who were on very low incomes when they were living independently, but that once they went into residential care, that those payments were discontinued. Again, that carried on for quite a long period of time and was publicly transparent. A case then emerged, and again, it was Minister Seamus Brennan during the government that you talk about who corrected that. So Seamus Brennan, the late Seamus Brennan, took the decision that residents would be allowed to retain their domiciliary care, those who were in a residential setting or in a hospital. And that was eventually rectified in the 2000s. Something, by the way, which has not been rectified in Northern Ireland today. Even to this present day in Northern Ireland, if you're in a hospital or in a residential care for longer than 4 weeks, you get a reduction. So that's a public policy issue, but the problem was, again, the secondary legislation was wrongly drafted and was inconsistent with the Primary Act of 1970. And I would say generally, Deputy, that at any time in government habitually will get updated, perhaps every 6 months, about what are called sensitive litigation cases or cases of major litigation. Could be 30 cases at any one time that government is alerted to. And that list is culled from a further list of about 200 cases of litigation against the state that are within the Attorney General's office. I would refer you to the fact that 20 years ago, the government established the State Claims Agency, took it out of the realm of the political area and arena for medical negligence cases and for personal injuries cases. So where the State Claims Agency, on behalf of the state, decides now, rightly or wrongly, or insensitively or sensitively, the determination of how the state defends various cases. And the net point, really, in respect of this, is that the focus of that government was to improve substantially disability allowance and payments in the 2000s, and to use the resources for that generation, and to significantly improve disability. And that call will always be made, Deputy. Like in the last 2.5 years of this government has already committed to about 6 billion in retrospective payments, just in 3 or 4 areas, 6 billion. The issue is going to arise, Deputy, too. Calls have to be made as well in respect of the needs of the current generation and the future in terms of the allocation of resources. There will be good times and there will be bad times in terms of public finances, and the economies are cyclical. And there's a very fundamental issue in terms of how one allocates those resources. And at any one time, there can be up to 30 sensitive cases before government.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And ultimately, the Oireachtas and the government of the day has to make decisions in respect of that. Not all of them palatable or in any way desirable.
Taoiseach, no apology, no admission that you were wrong. The Taoiseach stood today where you were yesterday and says the state didn't have a leg to stand on. And he said that because we have the memos. 2009, you were given legal advice, you, as a member of Cabinet, were given legal advice in this memo to say extremely unlikely to be able to defend the case. We have other memos there that say that the regulations were without legal foundation. They were unlawful. These individuals, cut to the chase, these individuals were denied their payments unlawfully by the state. That is crystal clear now. You were a member of Cabinet who agreed to this strategy. You were asked in 2010 as a member of Cabinet to continue to agree to the strategy of the HSE denying all claims for back payments in relation to these payments, despite the fact that you knew they were unlawful at the time. Now, don't try and fob it off to the State's Claims Agency or allocations of resources. These are people, in some cases, with profound disabilities who are in the care of the state. where they expect their government to stand up for them, to advocate for them. You preyed on their vulnerability. You said we will not set up a repayment scheme unless the floodgates open and more claims come forward. Now, how do you justify that? Do you accept that you were informed in 2009 and 2010 in relation to these matters? And how do you justify, knowing that they were unlawful, that you continue to deny these individuals their payments and actually not take any action even to identify the exposure of the state in case these vulnerable citizens became aware of their legal entitlement?
Well, in the first instance, my understanding about it, the 2009 memo was withdrawn from that cabinet meeting. It would have been circulated, but would have been withdrawn. So there was no decision at that cabinet meeting in respect of that legal strategy. But that's not the more fundamental point. Is, as I said, that there's a range right now. There's up to 30 litigation cases will come before the cabinet in an updated form. How many of them are right? Of those, that's a culling of 200 cases. And let's be honest, all of them, quite a significant number, will be sensitive. As an opposition member, if you're presented with any one of them, I know what your answer will be. It will be paid out 100%. Because that has been your stock answer the whole way for the last 3 years. Sorry, there will be legal advices coming, but the key point that ultimately we all have to decide. We all have to decide in respect of, and it makes this one. Are we saying, for right forward, that we have an infinite resource base, and that the current taxpayers and current generations will consistently have to pay for historic mistakes or historic wrongs? I'm putting the question to you, and that is a key. I would argue that's a very key fundamental point in terms of the allocation of resources. It's not fobbing anything off, Deputy. It's just putting the reality that confronts any government at any particular time as we move forward. Which you supported. You voted for it. You supported it. You haven't apologised for it. You supported it.
Could we please do it through the chair? Thanks.